So today's episode is very real, and my guest Ruby Marez is in Los Angeles where the fires are happening, and luckily she's safe and not in the evacuation zone, and her home is safe. And a number of my people, my close childhood friends, have lost their family homes. So she originally canceled our recording yesterday, but we got to talking. We ended up staying on the phone for over an hour. There's a lot of intersection and commonality in terms of our backgrounds in performing and play and use of humor in healing trauma and addressing trauma and using humor as a doorway into talking about trauma. And so while her work is really funny and playful, some of this interview, because we're talking about her reaction, what's actively occurring for her in the face of the fires that are actively still blazing, this may be, I just want to do a little bit of a trigger warning. If you're feeling dysregulated, you could feel really mirrored by what she's sharing. There's also a lot of suggestions and practices that are going to be useful for how to address when your nervous system is feeling stressed out. So I hope this feels useful for you. My heart goes out to you if you're actively in a fire zone. I just really hope that you're safe, and the process of rebuilding is unimaginable. So, and it's possible. So here is Ruby Marez, otherwise known as a Ramón, and I hope you enjoy. Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new. Hi, welcome back to Laid Open Podcast. This is your host, Charna Cassell, and today's guest is Ruby Marez. Did I say that right?
You did. Wow.
Fabulous. So glad. Well, so good to have you on. Welcome.
I'm having a better day than yesterday when we were supposed to chat.
Yeah. It's, we're dealing with the fires in LA right now. And so it's a lot.
Yeah.
You're in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And navigating, you're hosting some friends.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
2 left to go to Joshua Tree yesterday because they were just like, the air isn't as bad where I am, but it's still like polluted and ashy and smoky and yuck. Like you have to wear a mask outside.
Yeah.
And my friend had just recovered from COVID. So she was like, I've already been inside for 8 days. Like, I just need to be outside. And so yesterday when I was like, I have no bandwidth to talk. Although then we ended up having a great phone conversation for 42 minutes. And it was like such good medicine for me yesterday. Basically what happened a lot yesterday, more fires were popping up. It's inconclusive if some of it was arson, which is upsetting. They were accidentally sending out to everybody in LA County, like 10 million people, an evacuation warning. So like over and over, like, wait, what? I have to maybe evacuate? And then like 45 minutes are like, sorry, not for your area. And that happened 2 more times. And it woke me up twice while I was sleeping. I was like, please, like whoever's handling this, like please get a hold on this because all of us are panicking. And then we don't get the like error message until 40 minutes later or sometimes 2 hours later.
No, that's
so you're just up and alert, like, do I need to go? And then where do I go? And now there's fires. For me, there's fires to the south of me, to the east of me, to the north of me.
Yes.
So it's kind of like, where do I go?
Well, and so to give a little context for our listeners, while you are a writer, an actress, a comedian, a clown, a drag king, you have this one-person show, And in that show, one of the things, Ramón, hello. Yeah. Some people are going to be listening and some people are going to be seeing your awesome t-shirt and getting to engage with Ramón. But one of the things that you do in your show is you talk about the window of tolerance, which relates to nervous system regulation. And you're educating people about the nervous system and wellness using play and comedy.
Yeah. Which is like so useful right now. Even for me just to notice, I think a lot of it, they always say, right, in therapy, like the first key is noticing. So noticing like my brain's been hijacked by fear. I'm not able to totally connect to a feeling. I've had so many wonderful friends in state, out of state, be like, how are you doing? And I don't have a response.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've just been like, I don't know. Like I'm on edge, but I know that's not a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a state. Or sometimes I'm like, okay, currently I'm feeling a lot of grief or I'm feeling devastated, but we're still in the experience of wildfires happening all around us. So like, I'm not out of it to even, I'm just feeling like, oh, I keep coming back to my body and then being disconnected and coming back and being disconnected. So noticing over and over, like getting a message saying, evacuation warning. Of course it makes me anxious, and then getting one saying, oh, not you. Sorry about that. That was an error. You're like you're coming back down into a more regulated nervous system, but also then you're pissed. You're like, what, dude?
I had to pack a go bag. I could see the fire from my house in Oakland earlier in a couple months ago. And the panic of trying to collect your stuff. And so I can only imagine riding this insane roller coaster where you're getting those messages. And if you're waking up, you're completely disoriented.
Yeah.
In January, I had a home invasion and it was at 4 a.m.
Oh.
And so that time for a good portion of the year, it was like, even last night, actually, my dog jumped off the bed and that was what had happened during the home invasion. So I immediately was like, is there something that I need to be alerted to? Yeah. Right? Why isn't she just laying there sleeping? So the way that the nervous system can react so quickly, even, beyond, before you can actually logically think about something, your body is having its reactions. So you're educated about all this stuff. So you have this observer, but your body is still doing what it does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And knowing like the practices I've come back to throughout this week is like tapping, a lot chest tapping to like get it out, shaking, doing horsey lips, like, but even knowing like, oh, I'm just doing like superficial scrapes, going to yoga, like doing it online. And then it's just a half mile from my house. So like going down there, because again, I'm not in a fire area or an evacuation zone. We're south of it. So having that, going to meditation, I have little sound bowls doing that. Even being with my friend here, it's like helpful because you have somebody with you to like cry. There she is. Someone to cry with or like to be confused about everything. Someone with you. But in terms of like nervous system states, I mean, I've noticed for myself so much this week, me going, and I'm such a like fight and flight person. Mm-hmm. And this week, because it wasn't totally happening where I was living, but nearby, I've just been in a freeze state because I had to evacuate 4 times in 2020 from fires alone. Mm-hmm. Then another time in 2020 due to a stalker who may or may not have gotten my location information and having to evacuate and go to his house in the woods. Yeah. And then all last January 3rd, my apartment flooded for the first time. And then there were subsequent floods, not from natural disaster, from like bad pipes that my building refused to fix. And then we discovered I had mold and it was toxic mold, which explained why I was sick for that whole year before. And nobody could figure out why. And so I've been displaced and still am for over a year. I'm at my brother's place now. And so I relocated before I came to my brother's place like 10 times.
Which is, each repetition kind of is amplified by the previous experience.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Really, really managed a lot. And then that kind of bracing of when can I come down from this? Or do I have to still be on alert when you're getting those notifications?
And also, grieving
Mm-hmm.
for everybody that's lost their homes and their things and knowing exactly how that feels. Because, the entire time this whole mold thing was going on, because they said at first it was only one part of my apartment and you're out of your home, your thought is, I'm going to be able to return to my own bed one day. And then I came home several months later and realized the mold was everywhere and it had eaten up a chunk of my bed. Like it had gone through the walls and eaten my bed. So like that devastation, like my favorite, the thing that we need most, sleep, and my favorite bed ever is now completely filled with mold, and like all that hope is gone, and having to throw out all your furniture. Like it's just so painful because not like I'm prioritizing stuff, but it's also like I worked so hard to have a home, and everything was secondhand and from friends that were moving and donated. Even that bed was like a donation from my friend. It was a California king bed, which was like, oh my God, what luxury to be able to roll around, So that grief and that loss of like, you don't have a home anymore. You don't have the drawers that your partner like put beautiful stenciling on, like all those things. It's not that things, it's so much as like your stability has been taken away from you from actions that you haven't even done.
Mm-hmm.
And then insurance companies not fulfilling anything and dragging you along. And I feel so much for everybody that's going through it because it's just so intense. One day in your bed and the next moment you don't have it, which is so threatening to our nervous system. I mean, housing is everything for us, even for all animals, for bears, for deers. But if we don't feel a state of like safe home, we can never really come back into our body and be united with our brain in a regulated way because we're on high alert. So definitely it's been a week of feeling hijacked.
Yeah.
And not like shaming myself, just, having that ability to see like, wow, I am really out of wits.
Well, I think what's important to say is like, no matter how much you could be a neuroscientist, right? Doesn't matter how much you have studied or know about the nervous system. I've been doing my own personal work and studied this and had a private practice for over 20 years. I'm still a human, right? And so you're going to be impacted, and we have cycles of revisiting. Even no matter how healed we are, we have cycles where we revisit and get a little closer to the core trauma we've previously experienced to move through it with new resources and more resources, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so it's hard when it's like the first time you address, like, let's say you have a lot of unaddressed material and then you encounter something. It's the first cycle of going through and into your trauma and how it's stored in the body and what the felt experience is and processing all of that. So it's a lot. It's a lot if you've done it before.
Yes.
And this is your second round or third round or fourth round. And it's a lot the first time. And so, I have definitely been thinking about friends who've lost their homes in previous fires because, of course, how can it not get activated? And I was thinking about you and so then it's a matter of, well, what do we talked yesterday actually about anticipatory grief.
Yeah.
And that article that I wrote. And that is something, it's like sitting in the bracing for, there's grief of what has been lost. And then there's grief of like, I don't know what could be lost.
Yeah.
And how to be with that, how to be with that kind of frozen, bracing state.
Yeah. I've just been for me this week doing like, this is so me, like hyper cleaning as a way to maintain control of my life. I did have multiple loads of laundry to do just because the way the past few weeks have unfolded. But being like, now's a good time to clean our makeup brushes. Or like, now's a good time to organize this cabinet because
micro getting into the like, let me organize my socks by color. Let me purge my pantry.
I could floss twice a day. I don't think there's a rule against that, right? And then like, if I can do anything every day that would feel good, for me, it's yoga. And that's always been, when I was sick from toxic mold, I wasn't able to because I was so ill. I was just like in bed and very, very ill. And so that was probably when I was at my lowest. And oddly, this sounds so weird. And for anybody listening, when like your body's so ill you can't move, the only thing that did help me a bit, other than seeing some comedy shows on TV that were just like, a nice distraction, was listening to music. Because I could at least like be in bed on my back and like move my arms a little bit, and it helped give me energy. And I listened to the ACD song Thunderstruck a lot last year because I was like, I need the energy from this song for my body so I can heal and so I can like sue my landlords, and the building manager. It's like I kept listening to it as a way to like pump myself up, even though again, I was in bed so many weeks last year, so ill. And like, there's not still a Western approach to dealing with toxic mold. So you're navigating all of that. And also feeling like this sucks. I can't really talk about my experience because I know I'm going to sue. And my lawyer was like, don't mention too much about this online. Even though posting about it before I got a lawyer was exactly how I got my lawyer. Like a friend of mine saw my post and gave it to that reference to me because they had to sue their landlord. And so I say all this to be like, when I was really in bed and sick and I was like, if I could do anything like with this information, what would I do? And it was like, I'm going to create a show as Ramón talking about this experience, informing other people about their rights, their housing rights in Los Angeles, what you can do if you have mildew or mold in your apartment, what your landlord legally has to do. Because it took me months to find this out. And I was like, what if I could shortcut it and have the person that I worked with that was a mold and mildew expert, Zarita Jones, shout out to her. And she's a housing advocate. And if I could create a show and she comes on the show and informs people about all of this, and then I'll feel like not only did I, no matter what, like my art is here for me and my art will help me overcome everything, but then I'm giving back too and helping other people. And there were about 7 people on my show. Well, we did the show that last year in June of 2024. And every episode was a new expert talking about something else. So the first one was Zarita Jones talking about mold and mildew and how to fight back with your landlords, advocate for yourself, policies that are in place, numbers to call. And she had a whole PDF. And then we, posted it on my Instagram. And then the next one was somebody that worked in a community garden. And that was a place I went to help heal my lungs and to get like good nutrient-dense soil like in my body. Because that's one of the things the naturopath said for me to heal my lungs and exposed to toxic molds to be around good soil. And so she came and talked about like how to join or start a community garden, that you don't have to have any knowledge or like skills. Like people will help you navigate all this. And then the third person, her name's Alyssa Parecillo, and she teaches, it's mostly women, but for men too, like how to come back to your body and like experience sensuality and pleasure and how to move your hips and release trauma from your hips. So those were all 3 people that I sought out while I was ill and recovering and activities I sought out, I mean, getting really informed about housing rights. So I was like, I'm going to make a show. I'm going to bring these experts on, and every show I'm going to come out to the song Thunderstruck because it's going to remind me of my power.
So you did it. And I want to get more into how you originally came up with Ramón and, and why specifically that show, because that's a different show than all of this. Like that was already established. The Ramón show, Spiritual Cheerleading 101, is the show that I'm familiar with.
Yes. That was the first show I did as Ramón in 2022.
And so then these ones have happened since. And so this is an alter ego really for you. This is a character that lives in you and keeps teaching different things.
Yes. Yeah. As we evolve, our alter egos.
Well, facilitating. So first, let's talk a little bit about Spiritual Cheerleading 101 and the material that you, like, what was your intention behind that particular show? What did you want to convey to people?
Well, it's funny. I call Ramón like my higher consciousness. And it's also, and I'll briefly share, like, I loved drag, but I was not someone that was like seeking it out to do it for myself. I just loved going to drag shows and found them such high energy. And I moved to LA and I was, trying to make friends. And a friend invited me to their friend's drag roller skating party. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, what do I do? And she's like, you just dress up as a dude. And I was like, okay. And so I went to my storage unit. I had like a wig from an old costume, this like red floral shirt with cut off arms, boxer shorts with like the Superman logo on it, you know, purple tights, and then these like psychedelic mushroom socks. I put it all on. I put the mustache on in my car, do my brows, wig is on. And I looked in the mirror and I was like, pretty good. And like that voice came to me and I was like, okay, I don't know what that is. And I first called him Raul because, you know, my mustache was like Raul Julia from the Addams Family, who's also Puerto Rican. And my mom went to school with him. And then I was like, no, Ruby, get your own name. So then Ramón eventually came. But so I walked out of my car going to this drag roller skating party in 2017. And it was the first time I'd experienced no men staring at me as I walked on the street because they thought I was a dude. And I walked with like the swagger of John Travolta from Saturday Night Fever. And that feeling of not being stared at like your prey, you know, was so empowering and new. And I was like, oh my God, is this what it's like to be a man? You just get to walk freely without being harassed or living in fear. This is so powerful. I want to, whatever this is, I'm going to do more of this. I went to the drag roller skating party. And as it happened, there was a producer for comedy tents and productions for music festivals at that party. And they thought Ramón was a character I'd already been doing. They took like my first photographs as him, you know, where I was like widespreading and like, you know, just so full of confidence. And they booked me a few months later for a music festival. And in that we had a comedy tent there. And they asked me, do you have any material about inner child work? And leading up to that, I had started to develop Ramón as a character. I was auditioning him around town and doing like what I now am calling like gentle masculinity work. So I was like, you know what the world does not need is another like womanizer, another person putting women down, another person using people. Like, I want to be the kind of guy I want to see in the world, the kind of guy I'd like to date, you know, and starting to do improv-based somatic exercises, you know, and doing research on that. And also just, you know, in improv, you learn so many different games. And for me, doing improv for well over a decade, like it just completely helped me navigate, what do I do in this unknown? How do I even have conversations with strangers? How do I put myself out there? So even if people do improv without the desire to perform it as, you know, a comedian or to take it into doing sketch or being a writer, the life skills it gives you, the way that you end up learning how to listen to people deeply, you know, like all those skills are really important for our social interactions and for us to be able to listen to ourselves, you know, and listen to our bodies and notice like, oh, my character is emotionally reactive every time this character does this. What meaning am I making of it? You know, and translating that to our own experiences. So I started doing inner child exercises and affirmations, but not in like a hokey way, because a lot of those things can be done in such a like not effective, hokey way that I was like, no, like, let me find a way to make it fun and interesting, especially for festival crowds. Like the attention span is short. Depending on the day, sometimes the drug or alcohol use is heightened. And so you really have to like reel them in quickly, you know, and like engage with them and make it real and not like fake. And so I was doing all these, what I now know are somatic exercise, but I just called them improv exercises to engage audiences, and it went really well. And I kept getting asked back. And for me, it was healing Ruby at the same time, you know, because I'm definitely way more shy than Ramón, you know. It gave me confidence to ask for bigger paydays as Ramón, you know, and negotiate my contracts even as him. You know, I'll be like, oh, I see that you're paying this guy $1,000 for the festival, so I should also get 1,000, right? You know, and like not being up defensive, but just making the case and being my own advocate, having like an outside voice and advocate for myself, you know. So Spiritual Cheerleading 101, that got developed during the pandemic. I started doing what I would call like deep therapy. in June of 2020. And it was just sparked by like how anxious I felt all the time and how reactive I felt. And I got into a fight with a friend, a dear friend. And for me, it was the first time I heard a therapist say the 80-20 rule. So like I'm reacting to this person as if they're 80% of that pain, but that 80% of that pain happened in my childhood and they're just triggering it at like 20%. But because I haven't processed that from my childhood, it's feeling like so much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And then learning about the anger iceberg and how, you know, when we're angry, that's like the secondary feeling. And underneath that is deep sadness and grief that hasn't been processed. So all these like, and I'd been in therapy several times for different things, for navigating breakups, for dealing with hoarding, like all these other areas in my life. But this was like the first time I was learning about feelings. And I remember she would start our therapy sessions being like, how do you feel? And I'd say something like I want to take a chainsaw and cut down stuff. And she'd be like, that's not a feeling. I'd be like, all right. Let me think about another feeling. I want to throw a plate against a wall. She's like, that's a feeling. You know, because like all I knew were like actions that I felt internally, but not like the actual feeling.
But those but what's interesting about that, right, is that you could go, okay, so that's an image of what you're feeling. What are the sensations that accompany the desire to cut down something, or the sensations that accompany wanting to throw a plate? What's the temperature of that? What's the texture of that? When else have you felt that?
Yes.
Right. And then it's like, here, clear emotions. Which one do you feel more?
Yes.
Mad, sad, glad, afraid, or disgusted. Right. And so that's great. But, and you also, who's your ideal audience? Because you've mentioned festivals, but I've seen clips of you working with kids and I really loved, when you had them going in and out, you had audience participation, which I think is an incredibly useful tool in doing educational theater. It looked like kids from the audience and you were having them stand in the window. You're like, if you have them, you are talking to your dad, where are you? Are you in your window? Or are you over here? Are you feeling, dysregulated? And it seemed like, I was like, oh my God, can you imagine if this was in all high schools, how useful that would be?
Yeah. My ideal audience. Oh, and I should go back and say Spiritual Cheerleading 101 basically came from the pandemic, me learning all these. I took like 4 to 5 trauma-informed classes online with like Gabor Mate and Peter Levine and like all these heavyweights in trauma circles, learning more techniques that I then adapted for Spiritual Cheerleading 101. And then I brought that show I created it for the Hollywood Fringe Festival in 2022 because I won a scholarship. And I was like, this is a way for me to take it not away, but like outside of festival world into a mass audience, a theater going audience, because that group might be more also willing, like a festival crowd is, to interact and participate and learn different nervous system regulation skills. And I never say those words in the show. Yeah. You could say those words, like even I would be like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about if I hadn't done the kind of work I'd done. Mm-hmm. So I just say, what makes you feel good? What makes you feel anxious? Mm-hmm. Because people understand that language.
Right.
And saying like, the only way through is through. So like, I also don't like dealing with my feelings. I think it's annoying, but it's also, unless it's joy, and then I'm here for that one. But like the only way to get through sadness is to be with it and nurture it and love it up, because if you push it down, it's just going to pop off in some other way. Through the Hollywood Fringe Festival, all kinds of age ranges and types came to my show. Mm-hmm. Some were children, some were older adults. I mean, like 70s, 80s. Some were people who had different disabilities, neurodivergence, physical disabilities. And I know I'm not supposed to say like, this show's for everyone, but it does. I am able to grasp a wide range of people because all of us have feelings.
Well, we all have a nervous system.
We all have a nervous system.
Honestly, I mean, I created a course and it was a 12 module course. And of that, I was like, if I was to take one mini thing and teach, if I had to die tomorrow and I could teach one thing to all of humanity, what would it be? And it is, how do we be with our emotions and our sensations to live a more joyful peaceful existence and impact people with more, have more accountability over our internal state so that we don't have negative impacts.
Yeah. And tools. So you're not being like
batted around and controlled by your emotions. And honestly, that's what it was. And so, it is a universal need that we have.
Yes. And it's universal education that I do want to bring this to all schools and age ranges. I've mostly been bringing it to festivals, wellness centers for adults, because the truth is like younger kids are still with their inner child and playful. Mm-hmm. And the group that has lost the most amount of play and I think disconnection from their body is adults. And the age range that feels like it captures that in-between place so perfectly is college students. Mm-hmm. And when I've done my shows for colleges, I mean, that energy is like so high, and the ability for them to like, same with festivals, like participate and want to interact and want to heal. It's immediate. I don't have to do a lot of coaxing. And I think college students are way more informed than I was about the nervous system and emotions and regulation. Right. And so like, it doesn't take that long to get them on board. I would say like they're pretty hungry for it. Mm-hmm. And it's really fulfilling because I would say like college started to become the time where like I could feel like I'm not able to escape all the pain that I feel.
That's right.
The way that I was when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And it just kept stacking. I started to feel more depression. I started to feel more numbness. When I learned in 2020 about disassociation, I had a moment of like, wait, what? That's not what we're supposed to be doing all the time? I would describe 95% of my life disassociated. And the 5% that wasn't it was me on stage.
Well, you're being, what you were saying about improv and what it does is it's actually asking you to be so present in the present moment, as you said, listening to others and yourself. And so often, if we're either dissociated, we're not in ourselves, or we're socially anxious beings observing and criticizing and not being in the present moment.
Yeah.
Right. So you're in performing, you're like,
And it's the only time I could really feel sensations in my body. Because I still, not as Ramón, which is funny, sometimes as Ramón, but not as intensely. Mm-hmm. But still as myself, Ruby, for improv shows specifically, I feel that anxiety the entire day of the show and that dread.
Oh, and God. Yeah.
For like 15 years, this is a sentence I say before every show. This is the last time we do this. This is the last time we perform. I hate this feeling. Promise me we'll never do this again. I'm like, I promise.
Yeah.
And then 5 seconds after I'm on stage, I'm like, fine. I don't know what that was about.
I did a one-woman show 25 years ago. And it was about, I was telling you a little bit that it was about healing from sexual trauma using somatic work and my working at Good Vibrations, which is a worker-owned sex toy store. And the boundary crossings that happened there that would spark memories from childhood and moving through all of that. But before I would go on stage, I would totally get diarrhea. My nervous system was I'd have to like pee 17 times. I would have to poop anything that I ate out. Yeah. And then and I would feel the dread. I would, my girlfriend at the time, I'd be like under blankets and be crying.
Yes.
Don't make me do this. And she's like, you don't have to. I'm like, yeah, well, I do. Yeah, I'm going. And it's amazing. And so even with that awareness, that doesn't mean you don't go out of your window, but I could meditate my way out of, or like do somatic grounding practices, get myself on stage. And then once I was there, I'd be like, oh, these are not my enemies. I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
But I literally had physical somatic practices that I had to do in order to breathe my way onto that stage.
God, I wish I'd had, if I could go back in time and do anything differently, it would be having these tools in my 20s and 30s. And I honestly don't know how I did anything without them. Mm-hmm. And now as an actor, because I'm so focused on Ramón and having Ramón have his own TV show and like do all these things that I see for him and go to colleges, it's been my main focus. So I've taken there's just so many hours in a day. So I haven't been promoting myself as much. Yeah. But I'm still, I'm shooting a commercial on Monday. I shot a commercial a few weeks ago. So I'm still acting, but like my anxiety around auditioning is just kind of, it's so low now because I'm like, whatever.
Amazing.
Love me or hate me. I don't know. I don't care. Like, and maybe it's because I wanted so much like juice. I'm saving all that juice for Ramon, the Ramon show, but I'm like, everything that's meant for me comes my way. And whenever it's not meant for me, doesn't come my way. And
Nice.
I wish I had that in my 20s and 30s because it was such a, looking back, so painful and like that need for validation. Because when it's like the reason auditioning is so hard is because you're trying to get a job for money to survive. And you've put all this money in training and you do it all the time. You receive rejection over and over and over. And I used to take it so personally, like I suck. And then I started producing works and being in the casting office and they would just be like, we don't want someone with brown hair.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, but they were amazing. Who cares what color hair? It's a toothpaste commercial. No one at home is going to care. They were fantastic. But they're like, no, we envisioned somebody blonde. So then that's what we'd be casting is somebody blonde, even though we called in all these brunettes. And you're like, oh, is that how it works?
Well, what's so crazy is that it also relates to relationships outside of acting and jobs because people, so much is not personal, right?
So much is not personal.
So much is not personal. So it's a useful tool to have in all aspects of life.
Yeah, especially when someone reacts in a way that you're like, for anybody that's been dating, like whatever level of tools this person has coming into the relationship, like that's what they got. And maybe they'll gain more and you guys can work on it together. Like that's always the goal and the hope. But when I've had moments where I'm like, oh, my partner's not able to be there for me, I'm also able to see like, oh, they're not able to be there for themselves in these moments either. Like, it's not like I'm the only one not receiving support. Like they can't even support themselves in that feeling. So it's not personal. Like they don't have that skill set yet. And God love them. And also God love me. And this might not be the right relationship for me, if that's what's up.
I wish we could keep talking because there's so much that we actually covered in our conversation yesterday. But
I know.
We need to start to wrap up, unfortunately. And
you know what I was going to add?
Tell me.
In spiritual cheerleading, we, 101, the first Ramon show that I did, the 5 feelings I covered was anxiety, judgment, or anger, anxiety, judgment, sadness, happiness. And we had fear in there, but the show was just like a little too long. And I was like, well, we can put ideas of fear and anxiety and judgment because that's also where fears come and anger too, right? Like
totally.
I am angry at leaf blowers because they're bad for the environment and I feel fear about the climate. Like their fear is very interrelated to all of that. And so we reduced it to 5 and I created my own feelings wheel because so many feelings wheel of many people's is so big that for me, it overwhelms me. And I was like, how do I reduce this in a simple way that also like, these are the 5 emotions you will probably experience on a weekly basis, if not daily, but really feeling that those are and like, they're the easiest to access in your head because even if people aren't able to somatically feel everything, they can intellectually be like, I know what anger is. I know where to feel it in my body. I know what anxiety feels like. I know what judgment feels like, So I picked the 5 that were the most relatable and concrete. And then the last thing I was going to say was for anybody at home, if you struggle with speaking kindly to yourself, consider creating an alter ego like I did, because all the therapy I did not totally help me knock out my inner critic, And I've done EMDR. I've done ketamine therapy. I've done mushroom therapy, but that tape is so well worn in the brain. And I was like, I need something to balance it and then place it in a way. So having, if I had to create the most loving, supportive voice in my head, what would they sound like? How would they speak to me? Or even what kind of partner or best friend do I want in my life? And that can be your higher consciousness, alter ego creation that lives inside of you. And then you always have a loving, supportive, positive voice talking to you. Because for me, it was too hard for me to say it as myself, But having Ramon say it I think we're being really hard on ourselves. We're doing our best,
Yeah.
And he's Puerto Rican and I'm Puerto Rican. So That's why that accent's there. But having another voice in my head helped me not fall victim to the inner critic voice, which had my voice for a long time, And so now we're, I don't know, 7 years in, almost like 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
And that inner critic is getting smaller and smaller. And when they pop up, it's not like I'm like, shut up. I'm just like, oh, wow. Like I'm being really hard on myself. I wonder what that's about. And Ramón will say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's this, your alter ego gets to be someone who's in your corner.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the use of humor breaks up energetically, just like shifts things. And so Ramón sounds, there's humor, but there's also a lot of kindness. Like you said, you wanted to create someone you'd want to date.
Yeah.
And then it's like almost like a positive dad figure in a way that's in your head. That's like, some of us didn't grow up with that.
Yes.
Right. And sometimes people don't even know how to talk to themselves kindly. They have so little experience with it. It's something that I have to help them like model what that even looks like. So there may be some necessary research or movies or books to read in order to figure out like what would that alter ego be?
Yeah. And it's not like I was like even totally aware when I was creating Ramón, but I knew I loved Gomez Addams from the Addams Family. The Raul Julia version. I was like, I love that dude. And like, I would want to date a dude like that. That's just like so infatuated with me and kisses my arm and hand up and down and praises me and would do anything for me, And it's like, it wasn't totally conscious. That's how I built it. But it has appeared to be like, oh, that's a lot of what we extracted and started to build Ramón as, And even when I talk as Ramón, it's different than how I talk. And that feels really interesting, especially on a neurological level. Like, ooh, that's how you like brain hack your own inner critics.
So there's two resources there that are getting more commonly known, put out there, which is Feeding Your Demons is a more spiritual approach to parts work, which is super useful. And I've seen dramatic shifts even doing one session with a client in introducing this kind of work with them. And then, IFS, internal family systems, is getting much more popular. But any kind of trauma work, good trauma work involves working with different parts of us.
Yes.
And having compassion for the parts that we may have historically had disdain for. Like the critic is just trying to protect you and take care of you, right?
Yes.
In the way that it knows how. The fearful worrier, I have a big worrier part of me, right?
Yes.
And it's like, how do we be with those parts? But I also really love, it's like, what is that part? What does it wear? How does it move? And you describe that, Ramón's John Travolta swagger confidence and the level of safety in that body that's not being watched and groped and, constantly is so important. So imagining it's like, then you have a felt sense of, oh, well, this is what it actually feels like to move in the world as this being. And how do I keep every rehearsal reinforces that. And so that you're literally, you're supporting the muscle memory of what it's like to be in a kind, warm, safe body. Right?
Yes. And they do say that play and comedy are like two of the most proven methods for dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
Because both of them involve, like, if you're able to laugh, not like the nervous laugh that we all know about when like we got in trouble at school, or like with our boss, we like giggle out of like, I'm trying to like regulate, but like real connection, humor connection and play, because it requires not only your nervous system to be like regulated enough, but it's like it's a portal outside of this, like life can feel like it's so in from your face and intense. And then to be able to play or laugh, like it's zoomed out enough. And that you can, for me, especially Ramón was like, this is another version of myself that does exist within me. And he's my portal to it. And so when I presented Ramón to Peter Levine, he's like, I think this is great. This is like the kind of therapy you can do on your own all the time. And I love parts work and I love IFS. And I'm doing that with my therapist now. And it's so effective at being like, even like, how old is that voice that's saying like, we don't have enough, or naming like, oh, that's critical Calvin. constantly telling me I'm not up to good, that I suck again. Boy, he's really worried about my future, you know? Mm-hmm. And then, like you said, naming them, what do they wear? Being able, I call it like tracking who's at the table. Mm-hmm. And like how much credence do I give each one of them? But mostly what's underneath that is they're just worried and want me to stay alive.
Yeah.
How loving.
Well, and so along those lines, does Ramón have any parting words related to, how, like, if there are people out there listening and still worried about the fires and how to navigate that, and also how can people find you separately? He can answer that too.
Okay, cool. It's Ramón right now. I would say connect with your community as much as you can, whether it's through Instagram, FaceTime calls. That's what I've been doing, is having phone calls with friends, Zooms, and sharing like what's on my heart, what's on my mind, and being with the feeling instead of talking myself out of the feeling. Because it's such a heightened time, so give permission to any feeling that arrives and don't put yourself down for having that feeling. As somebody said, this musician said at the workshop I was at last month, he said, every wave has a break. And I love that sentence. It lives in that same space of this too shall pass, and I'm still in some version of housing instability, but I do have roof over my head. I do have place I can shower and sleep and feel safe at. And I just don't have my own place right now because I got displaced from my situation. But the intensity of it has passed, So every wave has a break. And the more we can be there for one another, I think is the best medicine. Mutual aid, community support, we save us. We cannot rely on our governments to help us or save us. It's us helping us. And I have seen that. The amount of support I have seen from people in state and out of state, the way LA is rallying together is so beautiful. And I always say to people, I think there's amazing people in Los Angeles. I don't have any negative experiences of the people here. I think they're tremendous. And seeing our spirit really rise in the support and people doing donations and food runs. And you can go to my Instagram at Ramón Loves You, and I'll have different links for space and places people can donate. And so to answer your other question, my website is www.theramonshow.com. And my Instagram is at Ramón Loves You. So don't give up on each other. We're all we got. And don't give up on the planet. It's here for us.
Thank you, Ramón. I'm wondering if there's an exercise or some kind of practice that Ramón would love to guide our listeners through.
Yeah. So I'm like, do I do the judgment one or the anger one? Which one do I do? I'm going to do judgment right now. And then if we have time, I do anger. So basically, what's a judgment you have about yourself that you're ready to let go of? It has to be something that you're really not 100% ready to let go of, but maybe you're like at least 10% in on one to let go of, Mm-hmm. So it could be any kind of judgment you're having with yourself. So for me, my example is I used to drop things on the floor a lot, kind of butterfingers. And I would scream it to myself when I would drop them. I'd say, God damn it, you idiot. And then one time my roommate heard me and she said, what's wrong? And I was like, oh, nothing. I just dropped a fork on the floor. And she said, all of that for a fork? And I felt so embarrassed to even tell her why I screamed at myself because a part of me knew that was too much. But when she said that, all that for a fork, I realized how harsh I was being with myself. I never signed a contract saying I wouldn't drop things on the floor. So now when I drop something on the floor, I say oopsie poopsie, or I meant to do that, or time for a calf stretch, and I stretch my calves out, grab the item. And interesting enough, I hardly drop things now because I'm not screaming at myself to be perfect, to never drop anything, And so what the exercise is writing down something you're ready to let go of, a judgment. If we were at a fire pit with a fire marshal, I would say we light it on fire. Please don't do that unless you have those two things happening in your life. Instead, once you write it down, you can, in ceremony, shred it, or you can shred it and then put it down the toilet, flush it down the toilet, and then write on another piece of paper, a Post-it note, your new supportive, loving thought you're going to say in its place, right? So for me, I would say, oopsie poopsie, or I meant to do that, or time for a calf stretch. So what's the new, loving, kind thought you're going to say to yourself in place of that judgment? And then you put that Post-it note somewhere where you can see it every day. Maybe your bathroom mirror, maybe on the milk that you use for your coffee or mate, somewhere where you can see it so you start recording that new thought to yourself. Another example I give is I wrote to myself, what would it be like to live for one day without judging myself? And so that entire day, I started collecting the judgments I had about myself, not to shame myself, just to see like, oh, what's in there? What I yelling at myself about, And so I saw those judgments, and then from there I could pick, okay, this is one of the ones I'm going to work on for the next week. This is my new loving, kind thought in place of that negative judgment. And, I tell people why this is important is every time we judge ourselves, and that's different from holding yourself accountable, or taking responsibility for ourselves, right? There's a big difference. But when we shame ourselves, it does not help us nervous system-wise. It does not help correct behavior in the long term. And every time you're judging yourself, you're basically taking a knife to your car tires and slashing it, and the air is coming out. And we want to pump air into our tire so we're a full tire. So that's one of the exercises I help people do. And I hope it has the same effectivity for them as it does for me, And the other one I will leave quickly because a lot of people do this one. For anxiety, it's called the power pose. And you put your hands like this in the air, or if you want to have them as fists, and do it for 1 minute. You can do it before a date, job interview, because what it does, it lowers your cortisol stress levels and increases the feel-good chemicals in your body because you're making your body big, right? So you're sending a message that say, I'm not being attacked. I'm not under threat. I've got this under control. Sometimes our body has to inform our brain. Many times it's our body informing our brain. And so if we can do a physical movement like this, the power pose, to make ourselves feel bigger. And for our listeners at home, I'm doing a V shape with my arms up in the air and standing up tall. I'm sitting for the interview, but I would be standing up tall doing this for 1 minute. And that's an easy thing you can do in your car without that much thought to it. And people have told me many times that one has really helped them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Totally. Such a great one.
Thank you, Charla.
You're so welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. If you appreciated this episode, please like, rate, review, and share it with your people. And if you want to stay connected, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Laid Open Podcast, which is LAIDPODCAST, all one word. And if you go to charnacassell.com, you can join my newsletter where you'll get discounts as well as resources and be the first to know about my courses and events. At Passionate Life, you can read more about my approach to the work that I do. This has been Laid Open Podcast with your host, Charna Cassell. We all have different capacities, but I believe in our capacity to grow and change together. Until next time.